Okay, where to begin? Let's see. I wanted to talk about a few issues. But first, let me swallow my gum. Okay, so I'm trying to get connected with people who are like-minded and have the courage to speak what they know is true. And what they know is true is that in spite of the rhetoric, in spite of what we want to say, what we want to perpetuate, the myths, for example, about what it means to be transgender, there are those that actually want to speak up and speak out. And I want to be connected with those people. And the reason why is I want us to work together. A sort of united we stand thing. So, let me think. Let's start with this. As some of you may know, I am transgender. I am a very particular case where, unlike some people who say that they don't have gender dysphoria and can just transition, I do have gender dysphoria and have for quite some time. It's something that you don't ever get rid of. It's something that you manage. Kind of like depression. And depression goes hand in hand with it. So there are good days, there are bad days. And there are triggers, of course. So when I speak about trans issues, I know what I'm talking about because I go through it, right? Okay. So I think that what people know about being transgender is based on mythology, pseudoscience, confirmation bias. It's also based on a romantic image of what it means to be transgender. For example, everyone assumes that if you're a trans woman, and I say they assume that, I don't know if that's actually true. They certainly behave that way. They certainly speak towards that. I don't think in reality they really all think that. But let's just, for the sake of the argument, say they do. They all believe that a trans woman is just like any other woman. Except we're not. We're not for many reasons. Obviously, our appearance. Now, some of us are gifted with looking passable by certain angles. I'm passable by certain angles. Like this, up this way. To many people, they can't read it. However, I'm going to turn to the side. Perhaps you can see a prominent brow bone. And obviously I've got a big nose and square jaw. It's not as noticeable this way, but turn to the side and I look hideous. Some of that's gender dysphoria, but others can read it. I also have a very broad shoulders, giant man hands, right? For my size, my hands are disproportionate. If I were a cisgender woman, there were a lot of tells. So there is the appearance part, right? But let's just forgo that, and say, well, in spite of that, we can just look at their behavior. Well, many of us still stand out. Many of us, in fact, will pass perfectly because we got all the surgeries. We do our makeup just so. And yet, we still stand out. And why is that? Well, it could be the voice, but some of us are really good with the voice too. So then what is it? And let me oversimplify by saying some of it can absolutely be socialization. And that's also giving the benefit of the doubt. But a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is we don't have the brains that we say that we do. A classic excuse that you hear is that our neurology is that of our counterparts, our opposite biology. Of course, if you heard the rhetoric that a trans woman is a biological woman, that's not true. The fact is, biological females are, on average, within a certain tolerance. They behave a certain way. Their brains just operate a certain way, and some of that is social. A lot of it's not, though. So there's nature and nurture, and the thing is, the part that should be nature doesn't come out either for a lot of us. We can emulate to a point. That's the social part, but it still comes out. And a lot of it is in our aggressive behavior, right? So that leads me to the next part. Many of us are very aggressive, partly because testosterone does that to you. And almost like our brains are conditioned for testosterone. The effect of being under testosterone has given us something like a muscle memory, right? Well, that's led us to certain behaviors, certain very aggressive behaviors that sort of a devil-may-care attitude. So many of us have taken to asserting our validity, our place in this world as women. And we insist it's true, and we insist that you believe it's true. We insist that you believe our myths, even though we don't buy it all of ourselves, right? And up to a certain point, it's forgivable. Up to a certain point, you're like, well, who's it really harming, right? It's your business. Then you get into an issue where we start encroaching on others' rights, such as in Canada, for example, one of the largest and oldest rape relief centers or something like that didn't get funding. Why did it not get funding? Because TRAs, trans rights activists, lobbied against them, saying you shouldn't give them any funding because they are discriminatory. And how are they discriminatory? Because they weren't including men. This is where I'm going to probably get cut off. They didn't want to include men, which is to say biological men, biological males. Those who were born male, who were socialized male, and who still, many of them, have male urges, male weaknesses, right? In this rape relief center, they didn't believe that men, in any form, either the traditional masculine role or in the feminine, the apparent feminine role, they didn't believe they had any reason being there. And the argument was, and is a valid argument, get your own shelters, get your own thing, do your own thing. We have ours, you do yours. Where's the problem? And then I have to ask, right? Where's the problem? But no, they got defunded. And it's come to a point where this kind of thing is happening on the regular throughout the Western world. A lot of it in Canada and the US, and Britain especially. Britain, I don't recall if I've said before, I know I have online, it's a dystopia. To the point where they go knocking on your door if they hear or they read transphobic comments. Even though it's your right to tell what you believe, if it's offensive, if it is considered hate speech, they need to have that conversation. In some cases, they actually detained people, put them in jail for a few hours, in front of their kids, traumatizing them, even though they did nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with stating an opinion or stating a fact. The fact is, we are biological males if we are male to female. Hold on. Once again, I'm using my screen as a lighting source. We are biological males if we are trans transgender women and biological females if we are trans men, right? It's a fact that we should be admitting freely for many good reasons, not the least of which being medical reasons. But besides that, it denotes where we come from. It denotes our where we've been and what potentially we have overcome, certainly what we must overcome. It's not easy transitioning, and many of us don't go all the way. And when I say don't go all the way, I'm not even talking about the surgeries, such as quote-unquote bottom surgery, right? Also known as gender reassignment surgery. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about of the mind, of the spirit. Unlearning, undoing all of the internalized prejudices that we've incorporated into our systems, right? Our philosophies. Undoing all of that. And it's not just prejudices. It could be positive, it could be negative, whatever it is. It has affected our perception, and we need to look through new lenses. That means listening to opinions, hearing arguments that go against what we've always believed, and challenging them, right? It's soul-searching. Ultimately, we really need to be soul-searching, but do we? We generally don't. Why? Because it's too uncomfortable. And it might trigger our dysphoria. But you know what? If it's worth anything at all, then we should be doing that. We absolutely should, instead of just going halfway, because the reality is, in many cases, we do only go halfway, if that far, and we do project our internalized prejudices in our manifestation of what it means to be women or men. And part of that may very well be where we are going out of our way to shut down speakers, to shut down websites, suing individuals, mothers, for example. If you're familiar with Mumsnet, there is a Twitter user, I believe her name is Stephanie Hayden, and she is trying to shut them down. She's trying to sue them. She actually, I believe, is a barrister or something like that, which is to say a lawyer. Or maybe, I don't know. I believe it's that's what a lawyer is in Britain, but I could be wrong. I never really Googled that, but I believe that's what I recall that definition to be. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, if you actually pay attention, because I'm not sure if this video is going to gain any traction at all, but oh well. The fact is, we have gone too far. Our trans rights activists have absolutely gone too far, because what we're seeing is an infiltration. We are getting ourselves into key positions. We are getting lawmakers to listen to us. There's a pretty famous transgender individual. Let's just say their last name is Yankee Alpha November India Victor. And this person is responsible for getting a well-known feminist shut down from Twitter, and also testifying to the Canadian government. I believe that's what I saw. I think that's what I saw. Certainly I heard a testimony, something to that effect, and it's definitely influencing the government for sure. And so, yes, we have advocates, trans rights activists, advocates, who are getting our government to buy into our propaganda. And we do have propaganda. Even if you believe it, it's still propaganda. And the thing is, it's not exactly based on science. It's based on myth. It's based on this idea, this fantasy that maybe there's some legitimacy to us. Maybe we really were born in the wrong body. We really do have the wrong neurology for our bodies. Maybe we have all these other conditions like hypogonadism, something, anything but what it may very well be, which is sexual trauma as a child, or autogynephilia, or any number of conditions that we don't want to address. Because that means that possibly we are not as genuine as we want to be. And we have to insist that that can't be the case. We don't want to actually look in the mirror. We don't want to be judged, even by ourselves. But that is often the case. A lot of the trans women I've come across turn out to be closet misogynists, autogynephiles. And you know what? Maybe that's okay, right? Maybe it's okay that they're autogynephiles. And if I didn't say it in the last video or any previous videos, an autogynephile is someone who basically is in love with the idea of them being a woman, right? It's a biological male who often gets sexually turned on by the idea of them being female. And like I said, maybe that's not a bad thing, but it certainly isn't. It doesn't merit anyone to consider it as legitimate, being transgender. They're legitimately women. No, they're legitimately men who happen to want to adopt a feminine role because it might happen to get them off. Sure, let them do that. Let you do you, but as long as it doesn't affect me, right? That should be the rule. Not my problem. But now it is. Except it's not mine, it's cis women. I say cis. They don't like that. The gender critical women don't like it when we say cis. I have no problem saying it, and the fact is I still respect their opinion and their position. You are the original woman. Great. Awesome. Good for you. You've got a uterus. I don't. I really wish I did. I'm never going to go through what you've been through. I'm never going to have your experiences. I'll never know what it means to go through periods and cramps, and I never had to endure the sexism that you endured as a child. None of that. I got to be socialized as a male, not as a female, and so I got to skip all the bad parts, right? But I still respect you. I still wish I could have. I know that's not possible, but I do wish I could have. And so I get you. You earned your place. You earned everything just by being born and going through it and not killing yourself off, right? Certainly a lot of people do kill themselves off. In fact, the suicide rate for males is actually very high. Because men do tend to actually go through with it. They tend to be more final in their attempts. Genetic women do try it more often, but I suppose it's because they are more considerate of others that they just don't use anything that would absolutely work but would leave a mess, right? So good for them for being considerate, but it also means that they didn't actually do the job right. Good for them, of course, because we don't want them to kill themselves. We shouldn't want anyone to kill themselves, although I do have a different opinion on suicide. I should talk about that in a different video. Suffice to say, it comes down to agency, but they didn't kill themselves. A lot of men do. A lot of men take the easy way out. So women endured this. They sucked it up in a way. They went through it. Great. We never went through that. We're still calling ourselves women. We still want the same rights and privileges and responsibilities when we didn't earn it. What we do want, though, and that what we should have is mutual respect. We should have our own spaces. We should, on a social level, we should be allowed to occupy the same niches, right? The same general roles, up to the level that our biology permits, right? And for example, you're never going to have in, say, a primitive society, a genetic male that is a wet nurse. Theoretically it's possible. Certainly there have been instances where genetic males have lactated before, but it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. I know that I've seen articles that sort of encourage this route for men to do something like that. It's more like clickbait articles, but it is possible. It's just not going to happen. Sorry. So trans women, not going to be wet nurses. So basically, there's nothing preventing us from taking those roles, except where biology might get in the way. For example, in the spaces that are designated for cisgender women, right? Natural born biological women, if those spaces are designated for them, like working as the director for a rape relief center, maybe we shouldn't be acting in that role, right? We can certainly be in a tertiary role, a supportive role, but we don't have to be there, right? So I guess that's a bit of a ramble. There was something else I wanted to talk about. Oh yes, another topic. So today I got I got into a bit of a debate about transgender women in the U.S. military and why it is that we can't serve. I believe it was Contra that posted about this, and then I responded, and then a bunch of people got at me for my comment. But basically it's this. Trans persons in general are a liability. So the thing is, one, we're on hormones, or we want to be on hormones. Not all trans people get on hormones, right? But many of us want to. And when we do, it's really important to us. It's a big deal. Because it means shutting down, part of HRT, hormone replacement therapy, is shutting down the hormones that we don't want in our body and adding the hormones that we do, right? That means that we're addicted to a substance, or at least we're reliant on a substance, that in certain areas it might be hard to procure them. So let's say we're fulfilling a combat role in the military. This can be a real problem, because we can't always get to our supplies. And the last thing we need is someone who is having an episode of gender dysphoria getting at them while they're in the middle of, say, a firefight or something like that. I mean, this is hyperbole. It wouldn't quite go out that way, but let's look at it another way. When you are gender dysphoric, I mentioned before that depression tends to go hand in hand. And when you're depressed, you don't think clearly. Generally, you don't think clearly at all. You might still have your intelligence, and you might use your intelligence for evil, even, such as suicide, coming up with a very crafty way of doing it, but it can end up backfiring. Let me give you an example. I attempted, years ago, to serve in the U.S. military. And I thought that, well, let me just explain this. I enlisted as a male, and I thought that I could get away with it because I thought that maybe the U.S. Air Force was the chair force. They didn't require you to exercise a lot. They're basically just pencil pushers, and that they weren't all about being manly men, blah, blah, blah. Well, I had lived a very androgynous life. I had been used to, basically how I coped with my gender dysphoria before it really broke down was I thought that, it's something I can manage. I can just, as long as I can grow out my hair or blah, blah, blah. As long as I can see a feminine figure in the mirror, whatever. The reality was, the U.S. military, at least from where I was standing, they really encouraged, and when I say encouraged, I mean they pushed you, all enlistees, to exercise. They put mass on me, muscle, and of course I was out in the sun too, so all of my hideous features, which you can see in this kind of light, it's a bit of a V, right? Yeah, that was a lot more prominent as everything became shaded from the sun tanning. Of course I avoid the sun now like the plague, but at the time I didn't have that luxury. So I got really dark and tan. I looked dirty. All my ugly features just came right out. I had all this muscle mass, and of course, I was under the influence of testosterone, which seemed to get a boost from the workouts, and I looked disgusting, and I broke down, and I cried, and then I tried to transition. Started buying feminine clothes. I started looking up how to get a hold of hormones online, and I also tried losing weight and slacking on my exercises. I did everything I could to destroy that masculine image of meat and mass and just this hideous masculine image that just wasn't me, right? Because I'd always, up to that point, been very androgynous, somewhat pretty, and I could just be comfortable with the what if. Well, when the military broke the camel's back, all the things I just mentioned happened. It happened within literally a period of months. I also tried dieting to the point of starvation, like anorexia, bulimia. I was required to see a dietitian, and I had to have a wingman watching me so that I didn't end up, throwing up, of course, which I did. I also took other kinds of purgatives, such as the kind that give you diarrhea. It was like full-blown, like, body dysmorphia, anorexic bulimic, right? I also thought that I had heard a rumor, and maybe this is an example of toxic masculinity, that if you put tetrahydrozoline eye drops into a drink, like alcohol, it will give you diarrhea. It would be a funny prank, and these wingmen were joking about how funny that would be to do to someone. And of course, me and my sick brain thought, oh, this is great, this is what I need, right? It'll send me to the toilet. That's what I want. I don't want to absorb any of the food that I'm eating. And so I tried it. And what it actually did was it would spike my blood pressure and then drop it really, really quickly. And then I would sleep for like 15 hours. And of course, apparently there's a risk of brain damage or coma or any number of conditions. So it was really stupid of me. Now this is under depression, under gender dysphoria, and imagine if my job hadn't been electronic warfare, right? Imagine if it had been loading bombs onto a bomber, right? Or something else that involved something heavy and requiring someone else to help out. And I had done something irresponsible, like drink that, because I put it in my water, and I would just sip it throughout the day, hoping that it would have an effect that I wanted. I could have, one, hurt myself, and two, hurt someone else. Now imagine that my dysphoria didn't hit while I was in my tech school, which is when it happened, but when I was deployed. And then I started doing something like that, right? Just to get the body that I want. You're potentially looking at, besides lives being lost, taxpayer dollars being lost as well. You're looking at potentially, we need to scramble and react to a Russian invasion. Their fighter jets are here. I'm supposed to be getting a plane ready, and then I drop the ball, right? I drop something heavy. Or maybe I pass out in the middle of taking out a pin or some stupid shit like that. The aircraft is grounded and they can't respond to the threat. Something like that. You can see where I'm going, right? It's a real liability, and you can say, well, you're just an isolated incident, but you know what? Depression makes people like this. It makes them irresponsible. And gender dysphoria is the same way. I know for a fact that most people who have gender dysphoria have suffered depression. I also know that depression is correlated with suicide rates, right? So people are going to do stupid things. Another example of someone doing something stupid is an ex of mine who wanted to kill herself. She was gender dysphoric. It really got the better of her. And she wanted to release, I think it was hydrogen sulfide gas. And she was going to tape up her windows in her car, right? And I believe this is a common suicide in Japan, and there's a warning on it because others around can die as well, because it's a very poisonous gas, right? Gender dysphoric people tend to react very irresponsibly like that. So that's the last thing you need for someone in the field. And we're not even talking about all the other logistic problems that go along with it. I'm just talking about the psychiatric part. So I really think that if you have gender dysphoria, you need to be really, really cleared. Like, a lot of vetting has to go through just to prove that you aren't going to be a liability. And I don't think that most of us could pass muster. I really don't. If we truly, genuinely have gender dysphoria, that is. So that's a real problem. What else would I want to talk about? That might have been it, actually. Let me just end this video by saying this. Biological males are biological males, right? A man is a man, a woman is a woman, right? And a transgender woman is still a biological male, is still a man. I don't like saying they're men because honestly I'm sorry, it's just better to say male. But sure, a transgendered male to female transsexual, right? Trans woman is a man, biologically. That doesn't mean that she is in any other way male, although often is the case the neurology does match, right? Often the software matches the hardware. It could be a hybrid, right? Sometimes you're going to have mixed software, but very often the software does match the hardware. The same is true with female to males. And certainly some of that can change under the influence of hormones, because that will affect the software. What affects the hardware in this case does affect the software. And so many will consider us more androgynous, right? But we're still biologically male, biologically female, and you take us off these hormones, and we're going to revert to our previous states, whatever that may have been. My states, I should clarify that too. My state is without estrogen or testosterone, or more specifically, it's with whatever testosterone or estrogen is within a body that does not have sexual organs. How about that? So any testosterone that is created in the adrenals, I have that. And if there is any estrogen in my skin or wherever it might be produced, hopefully the soy that I consume because I'm vegan, great. But otherwise I don't have those hormones. I just have whatever my natural state is going on for me. My neurology is maybe weird, I don't know, I'd like to have a brain scan, but I am, by many standards, a eunuch. And if you want to call me a eunuch, that's fine. I occupy the role of female. However, I am never going to claim that I'm a biological woman. All of my documents, my legal documents, still have the letter M. And should someone say, sorry, if you've got that letter, you can't get in, I'm going to be very angry, I'll be very cross, but I'm going to listen to them, because you know what? It's not my place. And wish as I might, I still must obey the rules. I still must preserve female-only spaces, if that's what they really want. So be it. If I'm included, great. I do still use women's restrooms, but to be fair, they're single use. And any time I've used women's restrooms that are public that involve multiple stalls, well, I try to be, how do I say this without sounding like a creep? I try to be the last one out. If I get in and no one sees me, awesome, I just run right into a stall, and I stay in that stall, and I don't leave until I hear everybody has flushed and has washed their hands and is out. And then I want to get out as fast as possible because I don't want them reading me, because I know that they probably will, because there's something that I'm going to do, some kind of tell that will give up the game. And I don't want that, because I just want to pee, right? And at some point I'm sure I must give that up. I just don't want to use the men's room. I don't. I mean, if you know my history, you know that in some way I've earned not the right to not have to use the men's room. And if you don't know my history, Google me. I'm sure you'll find information about me. Alright, yeah, this is going to be it for this video. If I think of anything else, I'll try to create a follow-up video. Maybe I'll upload it the same day. I don't know. But this video is already taking so long to get out, so I'll see y'all later. Bye.